Okay, it's May 9th, 2020. This is George Webb on the Diplomatic Back Channel, the Potomac here near Washington, D.C. I had a chance to speak to a communications expert who used to work at the NSA. His name is Lee Wheel Barger, Wheel, B-A-R-G-E-R. He was a person who worked for Bill Binney at NSA. He helped install the Echelon fiber network, you may have heard about from the WikiLeaks. He helped did the battlefield communications system called Trojan Spirit, was very involved with a lot of different spy gear for special forces, and has briefed the team that, the technical team that briefs the president. So he told me a lot about the draft email system on Gmail for negotiating the Iran nuclear weapons agreement. So you have a lot of folks out there putting out reports, sort of the state-run media, that is saying, hey, this is an accident of nature. Even though 2 or 3 diseases don't combine usually like this, in the wild it would take thousands of years of evolution. You know, the HIV sections come into the S protein and the envelope protein and the capsid protein and the non-structural proteins on the inside, all from HIV. It looks CRISPR'd. Even though that none of those things from HIV ever were in SARS coronavirus before, even though we were paying contracts both at Duke University, at the National University of Singapore, possible the human testing was done in Daegu, Korea. These are all hallmarks of bioweapons testing and bioweapons development, bioweapons R&D, research and development. You pay for the research, which we have those purchase orders. You pay for the development. You start in a place that is willing to do the testing on animals and also testing on humans, because for bioweapons, there is no FDA approval. And then you start looking, once you're done with the R&D phase, then the implementation, the effectuation of the military operation. We have connections now to people involved that actually are writing the R&D plan, which is what are the 5 top bioweapons that we should develop with these new CRISPR tools. You know what the answer is going to be with the biovaccines after the fact. You're in a great position to start taking action, like doing joint ventures with companies, leaving posts, leaving the door open at the Fort Detrick Bioweapons Lab. The person I'm talking to here also worked at Fort Detrick, designed a medical helmet that delivered video to the patient from anywhere in the world. That is what we have to look at. It's like a product development life cycle. We're looking at the research, which is the Fauci research, the 2 purchase orders, the $3.7 million at Chapel Hill, the $3.7 million at Duke, the Duke's relationship to the Singapore University, National University of Singapore, for the development and potential animal testing there. Then we're looking at the build-out, which is sort of like the live exercise, which is happening in Korea. We're getting closer and closer to Wuhan now. And then through this cult has a long history with bioweapons, going all the way back to World War II, this guy named Sasakawa in Unit 731. And then the deployment of actually sending these people to Wuhan and all over Wuhan, all over Hubei province and other provinces around there. Remember, the games are spread out over 9 days or 10 days for the military games, but you also have a whole bunch of other international games going on in the month of October, including the FIFA basketball tournament with a lot of our NBA players there who also get sick. We got the French team getting sick. That leads to the idea that it was deployed then. We have the French gold medalist and her Elodie Claudel saying she got sick there at the games with coronavirus-like symptoms. Her boyfriend, Martin, on the Dutch team, also with those symptoms. The French team, about half, she said, fell ill. We got the Italian team saying that. We got the Swedish team saying that. These are all evidences of deployment, that the weapon was deployed there. We also have these 5 folks that are checked in for malaria, which is odd because they're staying at a 5-star Imperial hotel. So there's a lot of things going on here that look to a worldwide pandemic similar to the network effects that happened to the Spanish flu 100 years ago, where all these military people disembarked, got on ships to go to all different places. The only difference now is airplanes. So we know it's affected the whole world. We know it's $20 trillion in damage, something like that. We're about ready to go into yet another level of stepped up rhetoric between the two countries in terms of beyond economic sanctions now to talking about using cyber weapons and maybe even returning fire, if you will, with a bioweapon of our own, which could lead to a hot war. And it could all be for both sides not having any information about the other. The other side, the Chinese side, says it's these athletes. The focus needs to be on the athletes. The foreign minister's spokesman, Li Jian, says it's the athletes. You have to put the focus on the athletes. We want the athletes' information. So what happens after the deployment? You do assessment. After you do the deployment of the bioweapon, just like after a bombing run, you run over with a surveillance plane later the next day in the light of day to see what the effect of the bombing run was. The same thing happens with this assessment. If we see people involved in all phases of sort of the cleanup from the battlefield, if you will, with the dead bodies, all going to a centralized Air Force base in the middle of the United States for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which we know moves these materials. If they're there then being forwarded and processed through a military process from around the world, if we're seeing test kits, 500,000 from this same place in South Korea being secreted here into Maryland under armed guard, and you want to assess whether it's a military operation or not, you have to see if there's anybody there carrying encrypted communications. In the same way that uranium, weapons-grade uranium, is a banned substance, is a controlled trade commodity by the State Department, encrypted communications are also military grade and tracked by the State Department. So the first place you look to see if this is indeed a military operation is, was there any NATO couriers there? Was there any encrypted communications used? If we learn nothing from the last 4 years of study with these blackberries, these encrypted blackberries that we've discovered, from a person who was, from all intents and purposes, a NATO courier, or at least has all the footprints of being a NATO courier, it's that these people use these devices to plan these operations. Libya, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, the Iran nuclear weapons deal, all negotiated on these encrypted devices. If people want to say I'm wrong about my previous reporting, ask the people who are involved, have you ever worked for a company called Singapore Statistics? Have you ever been a courier for the Supreme Allied Commander? Why did CNN choose to hide that information from you, right? I'm only asking questions because we're trying to discern as a country what happened to our country, okay? This is standard protocol that anyone would go through. If you had a plane explode or some kind of other terrorist event, you would immediately go and look at everybody who was on the plane. In 9/11, for instance, you'd say, oh, there's this Mohammed Atta guy. He works for this Duisburg Foundation. He trained at this military base in Georgia. He trained at this military base in Florida. Wow, he has a lot of connections to this special access program here with the Joint Task Force out of Fort Belvoir. This looks really fishy. Everybody else, yeah, it seems like a normal American family or a normal American businessman. But this one guy here sticks out. He's training pilots on how to fly. I look for people who are writing about viruses in the World Health Organization R&D blueprint. I look for people who are involved with the DTRA in getting dead bodies back to Scott Air Force Base and collecting and transporting these people with highly infectious diseases. I look for people who are doing the statistics, Singapore Statistics, that are doing the collection and analysis of how effective was the bioweapon. And we have that all in one nuclear group. And I won't say the name, but I think it's a worthwhile question to ask. If no one else is asking it, then we have to ask it. We can't let our country suffer another round. The difference between a bioweapon and a natural substance is you can bring the bioweapon back. In the fall, you can bring it back in a state that opens up too quickly according to their narrative. We're just at the mercy of more attacks until we look at this network and get the information about this network. If there's nothing there, if there's no there there, there's no there there. But I don't see why all the people of the U.S. team don't come forward and show their tests and say, hey, I wasn't positive for the antibody. Everyone on the team should be able to say where they were born, where they went to high school, where they went to college, how they got on the team, and name, rank, and serial number. That we at least owe that to the Chinese, and the Chinese owe us in return. We can negotiate with them to go through their different weapons laboratories and get all the information that we need. It seems like just the sensible way to de-escalate a worldwide potential brink of at least economic war and possibly worse, cyber war. Seems like the obvious way to go to de-escalate. So that's my recommendation for tonight. Again, we're going to be talking with people like Lee Wheelbarger. He has a website, a YouTube site that you can go and check out, and use the connections like Bill Binney and so forth to get this information to the president and say, what does an operation look like? What did Libya look like? Syria, Sudan, Yemen, the Iran nuclear deal. How did they do it before? What kind of devices do they use? You're going to find they're going to be NATO blackberries, and that's going to point us in the right direction. It's worth asking the question. This is our world that we're talking about, not just our country. Thank you.